What's up everybody, Scrunch here, and today I am coming at you with an explosive trap build guide. This is my very first build guide I've ever made, so I'm hoping you enjoy it and you can at least learn a thing or two out of this. Enjoy! So first, let's get started with the wands. What you're going to want on a wand, there's four main things. One of them is going to be +1 to level of all fire spell skill gems. The other one is going to be +1 to level of all spell skill gems. So, aside from that, you want increased crit strike chance for spells and increased crit strike multiplier. These are going to be the main four things you want to bring explosive trap to absolutely insane damage. And then of course you have two other options. You can either do adds fire damage to spells and then trap throwing speed, or you can replace the increased fire damage to spells with spell damage. And then when it comes to your other wand, you're going to want to do the exact same thing. The one that I have here does not have +1 to all spell skill gems, but it's definitely something that I am trying to craft right now. The more levels you add onto the explosive trap, the more radius you get, and the more explosions you get. And the more explosions means way more damage. Also, as an added bonus, you gain 4 levels to your Herald of Ash, which also gives you more damage, so it comes out to be pretty fucking nuts. Up next, we're going to take a look at the helmet we use. The one I have here is nothing special at all. It doesn't even have the right enchant on it. What you want to aim for with the enchant is Explosive Trap has 2 additional smaller explosions, or if you want it to look pretty, go with Explosive Trap has increased area of effect. Aside from that, I just wanted a basic helmet for survival of life. I went with as much maximum life as I could get for now, fire, cold, and lightning resistance, and then I added some AoE to it. The more AoE you get on Explosive Trap, the easier it is to clear packs, so it becomes pretty fun. And progressively easier as your AoE increases. Next is my absolute favorite part, a 6-link double corrupted carcass jack. Now I know most people are probably thinking it's gotta be a super expensive piece, there's no way I can afford this. And if you're new to the game, it is gonna be a tough piece to afford, but since traps are not a popular skill, you can buy one just like this with +2 to socketed AoE and +2 to socketed trapper mind gems for about 12x, which honestly is not bad at all, especially for the amount of added damage and radius that you get just from equipping that alone. It is incredible, and I will never use anything else. You could end up replacing it with a Tinker skin though. A lot of people like to use that for survivability, but most of the time when you're using a Tinker skin, you're also using Slave Driver's Hands, which are a pair of gloves that increase your trap throwing speed by whatever your cast speed is increased by as well. We don't need that. The way I'm doing my build, I decided I'm not going with Slave Drivers. I wanted to get as much damage in there as possible, because your traps have a limit as to how many you can place at a time. So I figured I'm going to try and make it that my traps will kill anything with the 24 limit that I have set. And let me tell you, it worked out. It worked out real well. It doesn't matter who I'm versing, whether it's Shaper, Uber Elder, or Cirrus, it will insta-phase them, and it will ruin their day. I will show you an example of that at the end of this video. Next, let's talk about the rings. Circle of Anguish is an absolute must, especially the ones with increased fire damage while affected by Herald of Ash, and Herald of Ash has increased buff effect. The reason you want this is because Herald of Ash gives you percentage of physical damage as extra fire damage, and since Explosive Trap starts off as physical damage, it becomes very, very useful. And then the increased fire damage, 70% on a ring is a lot, so it's just super, super helpful. Now, on the other ring, the main thing you want to look for is cursing enemies with flammability on hit. The reason you want this, obviously, is because you'll penetrate more fire resistance. The more fire resistance you penetrate, the more damage you do. Now, I went with an Elder-based ring just so I could also add fire damage to spells and attacks. That is absolutely not necessary. If you just want to use this other ring for your curse and some life and then resistances, you can very well do that. And if you do happen to get resistances on this ring, you could replace your helmet with a Crown of the Inward Eye, and the transfiguration mods on that will also greatly increase your damage and your life. Now let's take a look at my amulet. What I'm using is an Onyx amulet. It doesn't matter what kind to use, I just go with Onyx because I like having all my attributes increased. The reason I went with this instead of Azov's Blood is because I took Avatar of Fire on my skill tree. If you can't reach that on your skill tree, definitely use Azov's Blood instead, since that gives you Avatar of Fire and plenty of fire penetration. But if you do get Avatar Fire on your skill tree, I would suggest getting a double influenced amulet with +1 to level of all dexterity skill gems and +1 to level of all fire skill gems. Again, it's because the more levels you get on Explosive Trap, the more damage and radius and explosions you get. So it's just all around a great idea. You can see I also added critical strike multiplier on this amulet, along with trap throwing speed and extra physical damage as fire damage, because it adds way more damage than you think. And then for the last thing, I went with dexterity just because I was lacking in dexterity, so I figured I may as well put it on here since I didn't have many other options to go with. For your anointment, you have many of choices. I went with explosive impact just because I like having my area of effect. I am huge on AoE, so that was the choice for me. If you wanted to go with Elemental Overload for 50% increased elemental damage, or Disciple of the Slaughter for increased damage per frenzy charge, you could do that if you have a way of maintaining your frenzy charges. Next, let's take a look at our belt. Now, I'm using a Headhunter. You don't have to use one. The only reason I'm using it is because Ritual is around, and those Rituals spawn a lot of rare enemies, and I don't have much movement speed, so when it comes to that, the Headhunter just becomes the best option for me. I like having a lot of movement speed because I don't like wasting time in maps. I like to just get right through them and go on to the next one. If you don't have the currency to afford a Headhunter, you can go with a Warlord Influence Stygian Vise. The main thing you'll want on that is increased fire damage, which is a Warlord's modifier, and then maximum life and some resistances. If you can get your resistances on a belt, then definitely use Crown of the Inward Eye, because that is going to be a game changer. It'll definitely help you survive a little more. It'll give you armor, which I have absolutely almost zero of. So if you can get some armor on your build with a regular belt and a Crown of the Inward Eye, that will also help with your survivability and possibly take you all the way to level 100. Next, we're going to take a look at my gloves. This is another thing that I did not put much work into because there's not a lot of things we need on them aside from cold and lightning resistance, since we already get a lot of fire resistance from our Herald of Ash ring, maximum life, and then socketed gems are supported by advanced traps with trap throwing speed. You'll want to aim for a level 20, but I just have a level 18. You'll see that I put a lot of trap throwing speed on all my gear because I'm not using slave drivers, so that just helps me maintain a good amount of speed. Now, if you have the currency to spare, you can get another pair of Warlord gloves with increased spell damage, and then Awakener's Orb those, and try to hit something good with advanced traps and increased spell damage, just for that little extra boost. But aside from that, there's not too much that's necessary with gloves, and this will do just fine. Next in our gear is going to be our boots. This is another item that, once again, does not really matter. What I did is I got a pair of synth boots with 8% increased movement speed implicit, and then added 32% increased movement speed to them with a little bit of resistance and a little bit of life. That's all I really needed, plus cannot be frozen since I do not use a freeze flask. But again, nothing on these boots is necessary. I pretty much get everything I need out of my other gear, so this was just for me to get a little more movement speed out of them. It's just it's my newest craft. Right now I'm just looking for Onslaught boots for that little extra speed. Again, I like going through my maps fast, and if you do too, then this might be a good idea for you as well. And if you happen to be doing a trapper build already that uses slave drivers, definitely go for some Onslaught boots. They are super expensive, but Onslaught gives you 20% increased attack and cast speed, which applies with those slave drivers. That sums it up for the gear, so let's dive straight into my flasks. First, we're using an Eternal Life Flask just because they have the quickest recovery rate aside from a Blood of the Karui, but we're not going to use that flask since we want to have bleed immunity. Then we have an Enduring Eternal Mana Flask. The main modifier on it does not matter. You can use anything you want. I decided to go with Evasion Rating since that helps me survive just a little bit. And then we have, obviously, Flask is not removed at full mana. This is a must since we're not using slave drivers and we don't use blood magic, so our mana is going to drop very quickly and this will help sustain that. Next we have our Diamond Flask. I decided to go with the Chemist's Diamond Flask because not being cursed feels real good, let me tell you. We went with the Diamond Flask because any trap build is going to be very heavy on criticals. I am running with about 50% crit strike chance and 600% crit strike multi, and since Explosive Trap hits so often, a lot of those are going to be critical strikes. Now for our unique flasks, we're going to go with a Bottled Faith and a Wise Oak. The Bottled Faith we go with because it has increased critical strike chance against enemies on consecrated ground, which means a lot more damage, and enemies on consecrated ground also receive a lot more damage. And then of course we go with the Wise Oak for even more LE pen, and then to finish off your resistances if you don't quite have them at max yet. Last but not least, we're going to go through my gem links, mainly just for explosive traps, since that's the main skill we use. Everything else is kind of just there. I'm going to be skipping my passive skill tree on here just because it's a mess, and that will take me forever to explain, so I'm going to tag my Path of Building link down in the description below. So for explosive trap, all the support skills we're using are going to be level 21, 23% quality, aside from the awakened gems. Let's get into it. So what are going to be our gem links for explosive trap? Let's get through that quickly. First, we've got awakened controlled destruction support, trap and mine damage support, awakened elemental focus support, awakened added fire damage support for that +1 level, and cluster trap support. These are the key ingredients to making the most insane trapper you will ever see. Let's take a look. So that's going to be it for this build guide. Again, this is my very first build guide. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you were able to learn a thing or two. If you liked this video, please give me a like and a subscribe, and I promise I'll be coming to you guys with more builds. I have many others that I love doing, and I can't wait to show you.